warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwan recorded 80,000 new cases of COVID-19 on Wednesday. A growing number of the seriously ill are children. On Tuesday, officials announced Taiwan's 17th COVID death among children under 12. The previously healthy infant was found dead in bed. An autopsy found that she had COVID and died of respiratory failure. Around 60% of children aged 5 to 11 in Taiwan have gotten their first COVID jab, but the government hasn't approved any vaccine for children under 5, leaving this age group vulnerable. Experts say Taiwan's current COVID wave is set to tail off in the coming weeks, but new daily cases will continue to hover in the thousands.
降到万例以下是有可能，降到千例可能是有点不太可能了哈。
In much of the world, life has gone back to the way it was before the pandemic. But here in Taiwan, the borders are still closed to most foreigners, and some people are losing patience with those restrictions. As Louise Watt reports, both the country's tourism industry and Taiwanese who want to go abroad want the borders to reopen as soon as possible.
Taiwan's borders have been largely closed for more than 2 years. It was a strategy that helped keep Taiwan safe while much of the world was dealing with COVID-19. But now daily cases have risen to the tens of thousands, and people returning to Taiwan still have to quarantine for 7 days. There are growing calls for border restrictions to be lifted, including from the chairman of an association that represents travel agents.
当然，开放国境对我们国人来讲是非常重要的。我们每年到国外去旅游的人口有超过2000万人。 那每年到入境的人口也有1000多万人，所以对我们台湾的 GDP 有很大的帮助。
Asked on Tuesday whether Taiwan would reopen its borders in August, the health minister said it was too far ahead to know.
那我们还是觉得整体在疫情它的一个下降的一个趋势很清楚了以后，我们再来规划相关可能想要去玩的一个事情。
After more than 2 years of stringent travel rules, Taiwanese are hoping to return to an era of easy travel.
出国你们有比较想要去哪一个国家玩吗？
日本。
怎么说？也太快了吧！
因为已经想很久了。
我是想去纽澳，本来想去俄罗斯，结果俄罗斯现在不行。
Xiaoliuqiu, who represents travel agents, says while COVID hit many industries, it hit tourism the hardest.
如果觉得要与病毒共存，应该要尽快的适度的开放，让我们可以恢复到正常的生活，免得我们这2年多很多的观光产业，包括旅馆、旅行社，包括一些观光事业，都已经是没有收入的状况之下，没有办法再撑下去了。所以希望政府要尽快的开放。
As Taiwan learns how to live with the virus, people who depend on the tourist industry for a living hope those with wanderlust will be able to jet in and out of Taiwan again soon. James Raynar and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
A delegation of 5 French senators has arrived in Taiwan on a trip to enhance cooperation between the two countries. The delegation is led by Xiaoliuqiu, vice chairman of the French Senate's Taiwan Friendship Group. The 6-day visit will include meetings with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, high-level government officials and business leaders. They will discuss matters including security, technology and trade. This is the 3rd French delegation to visit Taiwan in 10 months. The US says North Korea will face a swift and forceful response if it carries out new tests on nuclear weapons. The warning comes amid signs that Pyongyang is preparing to resume testing after a 5-year hiatus. Stash Butler reports.
In a show of strength, US and South Korean forces conduct military exercises around the Korean peninsula. The joint drills involved a US aircraft carrier for the first time in 5 years. On Sunday, Pyongyang did its own exercises, launching 8 ballistic missiles. And the next day, South Korea and the US did the same, firing 8 more missiles into the sea. In Seoul, for talks with South Korean officials, US Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman says Washington is worried North Korea is planning new nuclear tests. and she's warning of the consequences.
Any nuclear test would be in complete violation of UN Security Council resolutions. This would be very destabilizing to the world's security, and I believe that not only the ROK in the United States and Japan, but the entire world will respond in a strong and clear manner.
The last time North Korea detonated a nuclear bomb was in 2017. But satellite images show building work at its testing site, and US and South Korean officials say a new detonation could be imminent. If that happens, the United States says it will push for international sanctions. But with the UN Security Council divided by the war in Ukraine, Washington and its allies might struggle to find the unified, forceful response they're looking for. Piper Yo and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
Beijing is denying reports that it is secretly building a naval base in Cambodia.
美方对检方立场置若罔聞，一再恶意揣测、攻击抹黑，甚至对柬埔寨威胁施压，这是典型的霸凌行径。
According to a report by the Washington Post, part of the new facility on the Gulf of Thailand is being built for the exclusive use of the Chinese Navy. Beijing has drawn increasingly close to Cambodia in recent years, becoming its most important ally and largest donor of foreign aid. For more on this story, our reporter Ryan Hoko-Patrick spoke with Michael Matza, a non-resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute.
One, they simply gain more experience in operating bases in foreign countries, right? At this point, they just have the one, and adding a second, even though it's relatively close to home, gives them more experience in maintaining effective military-to-military relations, in potentially maintaining good relations with surrounding communities. They just don't have experience doing that overseas, and doing it in a friendly country is a good way to gain some of that experience. Beyond that, I think there are security implications for a base in Cambodia. It's certainly not a game changer. As you note, they have militarized islands that they've created across the South China Sea, but it does allow them to project power a bit further west towards Singapore, the Malacca Strait, and into the Indian Ocean. It allows them to present a more complex security threat to Vietnam at a time when Vietnam is seeking to draw closer to the United States, and at a time when Vietnam-China relations are strained. And it potentially also allows China to more easily present a naval challenge to Thailand. They have a very good relationship with Thailand, but Thailand is also a U.S. ally.
According to reports, this naval facility is less than 1 square kilometer in its footprint. So how much of a threat could a base of that size reasonably pose?
This is not going to be a base for multiple aircraft carriers or anything like that. It's a small piece of land. Again, it's not going to be a game changer. And so we need to be careful about not overstating the threat, but it does give the Chinese Navy a new location from which to operate, and allows them to reach places and threaten places from a different angle and a different way than they otherwise might have.
Is this the new normal? Will China continue seeking to develop a constellation of military bases around the world, much like the US has now?
That's a fair assumption at this point. They have been leaning this way or moving in this direction over the past 10 to 15 years. They've fairly consistently said that they're not going to militarize islands or not going to establish a base in a foreign country, and then have proceeded to do so, first in Djibouti and now in Cambodia. Their recent outreach to Pacific Island nations, in particular the Solomon Islands, I think has the United States and Australia, New Zealand quite concerned. They recently signed a security agreement with Solomon Islands. Immediately, people in Beijing and Honiara were saying that, this is not going to be prelude to a military base. At this point, I think we have to assume that that's certainly a possibility. And I think we're going to see more of these locations pop up around the world as China, again, learns how to do this.
The coral reefs around Taiwan's Xiaoliuqiu Island are dying out. That's according to a new report released ahead of World Oceans Day on Wednesday. The Taiwan Environmental Information Association says the coral near Xiaoliuqiu is in worse condition than anywhere else in the country. And the damage is so bad, the reefs are unlikely to recover by themselves. Only 10 to 20% of the coral reefs around the island are still alive. Other hard-hit areas are along the north and east coasts of Taiwan. The only region with healthy corals is around Orchid Island in the southeast. As for what's killing Taiwan's coral reefs, the report blames human activity. Marine experts are calling on the government to do more to help Taiwan's coral reefs. Some regulations are already in place, but as James Chater found out on a visit to Xiaoliuqiu earlier this year, some say the regulations don't go far enough.
From the pristine beaches of Xiaoliuqiu, Taiwan's mainland looks serene in the mist. But beneath these clear waters, a looming ecological disaster.
大家都知道小琉球，它是一个大家号称的珊瑚礁岛屿，所以它的珊瑚礁状况应该要非常好的。那只是现在它已经在一个很不好的状态了。
Some 12,000 people live in Xiaoliuqiu, a small island 15 kilometers off Taiwan's southern coast, and most of the island's residents work in tourism.
Tens of thousands of tourists come to Xiaoliuqiu every month, and the once flourishing coral here used to be a big part of the island's appeal. But now, some are concerned that a combination of human and natural factors are causing irreversible damage to the reefs.
Xiaoliuqiu's coral is in crisis. Parts of it have been left barren by high sea temperatures, poor wastewater management, and a surge in tourism. Of Xiaoliuqiu's 7 coral zones, 3 are now classified as disabled, meaning they have coral coverage of less than 10%. Adju was born and raised in Xiaoliuqiu and now takes classes on coral conservation.
我们以前的小琉球，你可以在港边，你就可以抓很多的鱼。我们小时候把它抓起来，然后去炸，好几百斤那种。然后可以在潮间带挖很多的那种贝类，我们这边都叫头柜。半小时也可以挖一大袋，现在是挖不到。
To give the beleaguered corals some breathing room, 70% of visitors to the intertidal zone will now have to book online, and the government is restricting the numbers to 300 at any one time. The intertidal zone is the area of shoreline above water at low tide and below water at high tide. But some coral conservationists are concerned that the new rules aren't wide enough.
它的确在管理就是潮间带管理上有加强，因为过去它可能会让游客更方便，有比较宽松一点。那现在稍微有强制约束一点那这部分我觉得一定会有帮助但是在水下的部分，我只是觉得目前就于水下的部分，它没有提出比较明显的管理措施。
A January report by Taiwan's Ocean Conservation Administration found that coral coverage in Xiaoliuqiu's non-diving zones ranged from 6.5% to 31.8%, whereas in diving zones it was only 0.3 to 5.5%. As well as diving, severe bleaching since 2020 has contributed to the coral's dire situation. Bleaching occurs when ocean waters become too warm. As a result, coral expels the algae it needs to survive.
2020那时候就是没有什么台风，没有什么降雨，导致水温一直降不下来，那就造成，所以水温一直维持在很高的 level， 很高的那个水准，所以导致珊瑚大白化。
Since then, Xiaoliuqiu's coral hasn't been able to fully recover. But despite the significant challenge, Adju believes a mindset adjustment could make all the difference.
珊瑚是一个很古老的生物，它比恐龙还久，所以我不想要用我们人类的观点去看待这个，而是我觉得我们可以把我们会影响到它的行为，把它自己管理好，或许它本来就有能力自己恢复。
Conservationists like Adju are determined to do all they can to protect Xiaoliuqiu's coral. And the marine life that call it home are counting on it. Asnaya Zhou and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, what's the sound of nature? We hear from a Portuguese composer inspired by Taiwan's natural beauty.
I'm Rick Lout for TaiwanPlus. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Okay, there's a couple here. There's one here. You see, 2, 3。到目前的为止，大概6只而已啊，真的不多。赚不到钱呢，要钱也不够啊。来了，你看，又来了。
I'm going to prepare them in a more European way. I'm going to smoke these eels. The best part, put it in your mouth.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has hailed the heroic defense of the Donbas region as Russia redoubles its efforts to seize control of the east of the country.
Фронтова ситуація в Україні за минулу добу не зазнала суттєвих змін. Продовжується абсолютно героїчна оборона Донбасу. Найгарячіші точки ті самі, передусім Сєвєродонецьк, Лисичанськ, Попасна тощо. Відчувається, абсолютно відчувається, що окупанти не вірили, що опір наших військових буде таким міцним. І тепер намагаються задіяти додаткові ресурси на Донбаському напрямку.
Recent fighting has been fiercest in eastern Ukraine, especially in Lugansk, which borders Russia. Satellite images show severe destruction from artillery and airstrikes, and there are reports of intense fighting. According to British intelligence, Ukrainian forces have destroyed a significant portion of Russia's weaponry. Russian President Vladimir Putin expected to win the war in Ukraine within a week, but Ukrainian forces appear to be holding their own against the troops from their larger neighbour. How they've managed to do this is being watched with interest from Taiwan, which is looking to bolster its own defences should it need to face down a large invading army. Jaime Ocon has more about what's known as asymmetric warfare.
Throughout history, people have gone to war for countless reasons. Politics, economics, even clashes of culture. But the victor hasn't always been the one with the larger army. For a small nation like Taiwan, which neighboring China has threatened to take by force, the conflict in Ukraine is offering valuable lessons in defense strategy, particularly when faced with an army of greater capacity.
The reason why Ukraine is able to hang on there and to destroy so many of the Russian military hardware is because of their asymmetric capability. What asymmetric capability means is that we use smaller or more mobile but more lethal type of defense with a lower cost type of capability that is able to deter a major military force. And we want to procure the kinds of systems that are suitable for the asymmetric warfare on our part.
Asymmetric warfare describes armed conflict between opposing forces with significantly different military capabilities. China spends 17 times more on defense than Taiwan, with roughly 400 nuclear warheads and the world's largest navy. While Taiwan has anti-ship missiles and air defense systems similar to those being used by Ukrainian forces against the Russians, there's another US-made weapon that both Taiwan and Ukraine want to purchase.
In a howitzer is a a very large artillery round that when it impacts, it can really hurt a military formation. Even inside of a tank, it can really mess them up. So you want systems like that that can fire 30, 40 kilometers away from where you are, trying to break up the military long before it gets close to you. And that's what Ukrainians need at this moment. They need to destroy the Russian convoys before they even get to the cities or near to the locations they want to take. That's why it's one of the top requests right now, because they're so powerful and so far-reaching that they can destroy so much, especially in the open.
Weapon systems like the howitzer would bolster Taiwan's defenses by acting as a strategic deterrent at a fraction of the cost of China's hardware. The howitzer is priced at roughly $700,000 US. Taiwan has also ordered more Stingers from the US, which is a portable anti-aircraft missile launcher. It only costs about $38,000 US, but can effectively take out Chinese fighter jets, which cost upward of $100 million each. Fighter jets that are increasingly flying into Taiwan's air defense zone. So far this year, there have been more than 450 incursions.
You see a situation that China has been threatening Taiwan in a very serious way. And we don't have any luxury of waiting for 4 years, 5 years, or 10 years to beef ourselves up. We need to be prepared at any moment.
But there's a backlog on weapons deliveries from the US as the war in Ukraine enters its 4th month. And as Taiwan waits to receive this hardware, it's taking note of how it's being used on the battlefield. Guided by the Eastern European nation, which is proving to the world that small doesn't have to mean outgunned. Damon Lin and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
US actor Matthew McConaughey has made an emotional plea for action on gun control. His call came during a White House press briefing.
These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting. How about that?
McConaughey is a native of Uvalde, a city in Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in a shooting at an elementary school last month. The United States has seen a renewed push by lawmakers, activists and celebrities for gun reform since the Uvalde shooting. There have been over 240 reported mass shootings in the US so far this year. The European Union has decided to standardize mobile device charging cables. In a world first, phones, cameras and tablets sold in the EU will all use the USB Type-C format. The rule takes effect in late 2024. The EU says the change will save consumers over $250 million and cut 11,000 tons of waste annually. The change will have a major impact on Apple, which uses its custom Lightning cable in its phones. An annual hot air balloon festival is set to launch in Taidong County, southeastern Taiwan. Last year, the International Balloon Festival went local due to the pandemic. Only Taidong residents were allowed to attend. That's changed this year, but visitors will need to be triple jabbed in order to go up in a balloon. Local hotel operators say there's been an uptick in bookings for this year's event. Organisers have invited over 20 hot air balloons from abroad to participate this year. As for the balloons' designs, the county government is keeping them under wraps. Portuguese composer Fernando moved to Taiwan after marrying his Taiwanese wife. He then started a project to create music inspired by the beauty of Taiwan's nature.
音符在指尖流动，让人不禁陶醉在优美的旋律里。他是来自葡萄牙的 Fernando。Fernando 4岁就开始学琴，无师自通，从小就展现音乐天赋。任何乐器在他手上都能化为美妙乐曲。4年前在商店帮朋友代班的 Fernando 遇到来葡萄牙旅游的 Ada， 两人初次见面就互有好感。
真正会让我觉得可以试试看的原因，是因为这个人很单纯，他的世界里面就是很 pure， 就是自然，然后音乐，然后阳光、空气、水。
热爱音乐的 Fernando 主要工作是一位编曲家，他最近正在进行一项研究，将自然万物转化为音乐，连石头也可以。桌上满满的水晶玉石都是 Fernando 的收藏。为了研究它们 ，Fernando 还特地自己设计了一个 App， 可以测试这些石头的能量。
I can see the shapes, the difference of colors, but I cannot see the magnetic field. Now I'm getting the green field. I transform this variation of the energy of the magnetic fields in music.
将大自然的能量转化成音符 ，Fernando 也秀出目前的成果。
This is it's not an earthquake. It's many earthquakes concentrated in one. This was a big one. These are the small ones.
听到这些旋律 ，Fernando 马上就可以即兴创作。
Big one.
Fernando 相信大自然是有生命力的，这些都成为他的灵感来源，创作出有生命力的音乐。Fernando 因为 Ada 人生第一次来到台湾，用音乐与人交流，也继续在这片土地完成音乐梦想。
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally today, we leave you with images of a new national museum opening in Norway. The building on the Oslo waterfront took 8 years to complete and brings together the collections of art and design. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.